of us are familiar with the 4% rule, which means you can withdraw 4% of your retirement portfolio each year. But the one who just has updated this number, and it's gone in a much different direction than what most people would expect. In this video, we'll take a look at the new safe withdrawal rate, critically important information about the guideline that you need to consider before using it, as well as discuss perhaps the biggest factor influencing safe withdrawal rate completely overlooked. This famous retirement planning guideline was discovered by William Bengen, a rocket scientist turned financial 1994 study. He analyzed historical market returns and found that a 4% initial withdrawal rate would have been safe for a portfolio for 30 years. Means you can safely withdraw 4% of your retirement portfolio in your first year of retirement, then adjust that amount for inflation each year. With a chance, your money will last at least 30 years based on historical figures. For example, if your portfolio is worth $1 million on day one of your retirement, $40,000 during the first year, adjusting the $40,000 for inflation for year 2 and subsequent years. The numbers are based turns as of 1994, so naturally, the numbers would change as time goes on. Even though the portfolio was tested based on a 30-year likelihood, withdrawing about 4% of your portfolio is more than likely going to last for a much longer time, even a couple of 100 years according to Bengen. Some of us mistakenly think that the rule states that if you pull out 4% per year, you'll have nothing left after 30 years, but in almost every year after 30 years, even after adjusting for inflation. Only in bad scenarios would your level of wealth actually stay the same. Now this is William Bengen has updated his research with updated data, and now believes the worst case scenario withdrawal rate is closer to 5%. Even if you retired at a terrible time, think high inflation, poor market returns, everything working against you, 5% would still hold up. One who came up with the 4% rule thinks that due to current historical data, the 4% withdrawal rate should be replaced with the 5% withdrawal rate. That for a very high chance of success. If you're planning for a longer retirement, like starting in your 40s or 50s, Bengen says that it's probably smart 4% just to give yourself more of a buffer. The thing is, most people treat the 4% rule like it's carved in stone, not realizing that the guy, William Bengen, has since updated his view. Based on more recent data, a 5% withdrawal rate would be safe even in worst-case scenarios. If you're careful about managing your investments and choosing a good time to retire in terms of market valuations and inflation, now I don't see why 5% is not feasible. If that newer outlook holds up, it means a $1 million portfolio could safely generate $50,000 per year, or maybe even more. That's basically like Bengen saying, with updated numbers, you can retire with 20% less money saved. That's a huge deal when you think about how long working to hit their retirement targets. A lot has changed since Bengen's original research back in the 90s. Market dynamics, inflation trends, bond natural that the numbers should evolve too. Withdrawing 4% was designed around the worst-case economic scenarios available at the time the original study. That means if you happen to retire at the absolute worst time, think sky-high inflation combined with terrible stock market performance, you could still save 6% per year from your portfolio and be almost guaranteed that it would last 30 years. And in reality, most historical scenarios showed it lasting. The 4% rule was a really conservative baseline at the time the article was published. Even with this updated worst-case scenario, you can still save 5% now and still be on solid ground. But if you retire at a good time, that number could realistically be even higher. Of course, PAC guarantee future results, but we have to base our planning on something, right? Bengen's analysis is not a crystal ball for what will happen in the markets, predicting the future with perfect precision. It's more like a stress test. It looks back through over 90 years of market history and asks, what if we retire economic scenarios we've seen before? The idea is that if a strategy could survive those historical downturns, like the Great Depression, stagflations, or the bursting of the dot-com bubble, then it stands a decent chance of holding up in the future, assuming the challenges we face aren't dramatically worse. It's not a far more rational approach than just guessing or assuming everything will always go well, or poorly. Bengen's analysis relies on a 50-50 split bonds, which has worked well historically because bonds help smooth out the rough patches in the market. But today, many people aren't keen on holding that much in bonds, offering low returns, especially with interest rates being pretty low. The problem is, if you cut back on bonds, you're adding more stocks to your portfolio, which could also raises risk. Without bonds providing stability, you're more exposed to market ups and downs, and that can lead to bigger swings in your portfolio's value. Where stock allocation could mean more growth, it also means more risk. So if you're not comfortable with that, you'll need to decide if you're okay with the volatility or what works better for you. Bengen says that extended periods of high inflation is the biggest threat to a retirement portfolio. Even if your investments are performing, inflation quietly chips away at your purchasing power, forcing you to withdraw more money each year just to maintain the same standard of living. Bengen's guides by allowing you to adjust your withdrawals each year based on inflation, But here's the thing, those increases are permanent. If inflation spikes to 10%, withdrawal amount jumps by 10% too, and it stays at that higher level going forward. Even if inflation cools off later, those numbers aren't coming back down. A few years of high inflation early in retirement can permanently raise your withdrawals, putting extra pressure on your portfolio to keep up. Now, what if the stock market is flat for a really long time? These returns we've been getting lately can't last forever, and that's a fair concern. A lot of people's valuations are too high, or the future returns won't look anything like the past. But here's the thing. The original analysis already baked in some of the wins in history. It wasn't based on cherry-picked boom years. It looked at retirement scenarios going all the way back to 1926, which includes the Great War II, the stagflation era of the 70s, and other turbulent times. Interestingly, one of the worst-case scenarios in the dataset was someone in 66. Why? Because from 1966 to 1982, the S&P 500 essentially went sideways, seeing no real growth, especially after adjusting for inflation. Imagine retiring right before that. Markets flat, inflation high, interest rates. One of the key factors people often overlook is how flexible their retirement spending can be. The 4% or now 5% rule assumes you're taking your portfolio each year, regardless of how the market's performing or how high inflation is. But in reality, things aren't always that straightforward. If the dive right after you retire and your portfolio drops by 20% or even 30% and your $1 million portfolio drops to $700,000, $1,000 in withdrawals is now almost 6%. It's not recalculated based on the new $700,000 value. It was calculated by portfolio when you retired. So are you still going to go on that expensive vacation or dine out as often? For most of us, probably not. Being able to adjust cutting back on non-essentials or delaying big purchases when your portfolio takes a hit can have a huge impact on your long-term financial success. If you're during a market downturn or be a little more conservative during periods of high inflation, it can really help things out. People who entertain the option of working to some looking too good, particularly during the earlier years of retirement, have a much more secure portfolio, in which case withdrawing 5% might be too conservative. It doesn't have to be returning to full-time work. Even a part-time job can make a big difference. The ability to adapt to tough market conditions is a big factor to estimate, but it can make a huge difference when it comes to how much you can safely withdraw. And a lot of people overlook this, thinking they'll rigidly be withdrawing set amounts. It's hard to even explain how much of a difference a little flexibility can make in these cases. There's no sure thing when it comes to long-term planning. We can't bolds, so there's always some uncertainty. Bengen's safe withdrawal rate will depend on things like how long you plan to be retired, how much money you've got in bonds, you are with your spending and earning once you've retired. These variables are more impactful than most people realize, so rigidly abiding by 4% doesn't really make sense. Don't just take my word for it. Check out Bengen's original article and his latest interviews. Just remember, it's one person's hard and fast rule.